Okay, hi kids. Today we are going to go over history lesson number 8. All right, so let's get going. Remember in the previous episode, there is religious persecution in England. There were Puritans who wanted to purify the church and separatists who wanted to leave it. A man by the name of William Bradford, a separatist, is part of a group that decides to leave England for good. He travels with others to Holland for religious freedom. Then he meets a wonderful woman named Dorothy, and they have a son named John. But is John and the other children, are they forgetting their heritage there in Holland? Stay tuned. Okay, now the continuation of the story. And so because the Puritans and the separatists were worried about their children and still wanted religious freedom, they decided to travel to North America. "What about North America?" they said to each other. "The English who settled in Jamestown are free to do as they please. If we travel to North America, we too could establish our own colony, a place where every citizen obeys God." The journey to North America was long and dangerous, but 50 of the separatists were willing to go. Their leaders decided to get organized first. So they traveled back to England because England was very close to Holland, and they went to visit rich English merchants, part of the Virginian Company that helped people travel across the ocean. I'm going to write that down for you because it was the Virginian Company. Virginian Company. Okay. They helped people travel across the ocean. And so what they wanted were two things. What the Puritans wanted were two things. They wanted someone who could take them to North America, and they also wanted the king to promise them freedom to worship God. "Supply us money to buy a boat and food," the separatists promise, "and we'll share with you all the gold and jewels we find in our new homeland." But all they could get, whoa, there's a caterpillar there. That's not supposed to be part of this lesson. Just pretend you didn't see that. Okay. Alrighty. So they went from Leiden in Holland right here, and they went back to here's England right here, and they wanted two things. They wanted someone to take them to America, and they wanted the king. Remember this guy? King James. They wanted him to promise them freedom to worship God. Okay. But all they could get was a promise that the king would take no notice of them so long as they behaved peaceably. To allow or tolerate them by his public authority under his broad seal was not to be thought of. And basically, that was the best the Virginia Company or any of their friends could do for the separatists. And with this answer, they went back to Leiden. Okay? When the English men and women heard it, they were much disturbed. Some felt that without better assurance of peace, they would be foolish to leave this safe place in Holland. But the greater part decided that even though the assurance was poor, they should still go and trust in God to bring them safely out of their troubles. After all, they reflected, a seal as broad as the house floor would not serve the turn if King James did not wish to keep his promise. But what they're basically saying there is, who cares if King James promises? He's probably not going to keep his promise anyway. So let's just forget about the promise and just put our trust in God and forget about the king and his oaths. Who cares about that? So it was decided to go to the New World. And after much trouble, everything was ready. A little ship called the Speedwell was bought and fitted up. So this is a picture of the Speedwell. Okay? This is a picture of the Speedwell. All right. Then those who had determined to go went down to the seashore, accompanied by all their friends. And here they are about to leave all their friends, and you'll notice they don't look very happy. Their hearts were heavy as they left the beautiful city which had been their home for the last 12 years. But they knew that they were doing the right thing. Their friends watched them go, and it was a sad parting. They clung to each other with tears, their words of farewell and prayers broken by sobs. It was so pitiful a sight that even the Dutchmen who looked on there was scarce a dry eye. The pastor, right here, the pastor, fell upon his knees on the deck as they knelt around him. He lifted his hands to heaven and with tears running down his cheeks prayed to God to bless them all. So the sails were hoisted and the Speedwell sailed away to Southampton. Here she found the Mayflower awaiting her, and the two set forth together. So this is the Speedwell, this is the Mayflower, and that's one of your questions. So I'm going to write down the names of those, okay? So let's do that again. This one's going to be Speedwell. And this one's going to be Mayflower. So that's one of your questions, okay? Alrighty. So they started to go and sail away together, but they had not gone far before the captain of the Speedwell complained that his ship was leaking so badly that he dared not go on. So both ships put it into Dartmouth, and here the Speedwell was thoroughly overhauled, mended, they fixed it, and again they set out. But still, the captain declared that the Speedwell was leaking. So once more, the Pilgrims put back, this time to Plymouth. Now, you've probably heard of the name Plymouth because it seems like that's where they landed in America, but they actually sailed from Plymouth, a city called Plymouth that was in England. And they named it after that city in England where they sailed from. So isn't that interesting? They came from Plymouth to Plymouth. Okay, so just so you're not so confused about that. Okay, so they're in Plymouth, England, because the Speedwell is leaking again for the second time. And here it was decided that the Speedwell was unseaworthy and unfit to venture across the great ocean. That she was a rotten little boat was certain. But it is also fairly certain that the captain did not want to sail to America, and therefore he made the worst instead of the best of his ship. If it is true that he did not want to cross the ocean, he now had his way, for the Speedwell was sent back to London with all those people who had already gotten tired of this little adventure, and they'd also grown fearful because of the many mishaps. And the Mayflower, right here, the Mayflower taking the rest of the passengers from the Speedwell and as many of the stores, like all the extra storage supplies she could find room for, proceeded upon the voyage alone. So do you get what happened? They sailed off on two ships, but they ended up just on one because the Speedwell kept leaking and the captain didn't seem to want to go. So now the Mayflower has way more people and way more stuff on it than they thought. So it's going to be very crowded and uncomfortable. And the people on the Mayflower, some of them were the people from Holland that wanted religious freedom. Those people called themselves saints, okay? They called the new colonists, all the ones that they didn't know that were also getting a ride to America, they called them strangers. But William Bradford used another name. He called the whole group of settlers, strangers and saints alike, the Pilgrims. Now at length these Pilgrim Fathers, as we have learned to call them, were really on their way. But all this trouble about the Speedwell had meant a terrible loss of time. And although the Pilgrims had left Holland in July, it was September before they finally set sail from Plymouth. So they didn't leave until September. This is one of your questions. September of 1620. Now that is late in the year to be traveling across the ocean. Let's see. So the Mayflower sailed from England in 1620. William, remember William Bradford, and Dorothy were aboard, but they left Little John in Holland because they figured he would be safe there for a little while, because they knew that the new colony would be a really dangerous place to live. But now, because of the delays, instead of having good weather, because now it's late in the year, the Mayflower faced terrible weather for days and nights with every sail reefed. Now, I didn't know what that meant, so I had to look it up, and it means that they're not putting their sails big like this because it's way too windy for that. So they had to bring their sails in, kind of folded in, because otherwise the wind would just be too strong. So a lot of times their sail was reefed. They were driven hither and thither by the wind. They were battered and beaten by cruel waves and tossed helplessly from side to side. Oh, I would probably be sick on that boat. I would not want to be on that boat. At length, after 2 months of terror and hardships, they sighted the shores of America. They had, however, been driven far out of their course, so they were way off course. And instead of being near the mouth of the Hudson River and within the area granted to the Virginian Company, they were much further north near Cape Cod. So this is Cape Cod Bay. They were trying to get way further south, but they kept getting blown up to this area. And it wasn't good because they didn't have any legal right to land in that area. The company that took them, the Virginia Company, didn't have a legal right to land there. But when they tried to sail south, they found themselves among dangerous shoals and roaring breakers, and they were in terror of shipwreck. And so they turned back again to the shelter of Cape Cod Harbor, and they fell on their knees and most heartily thanked God, who had brought them safely over the furious ocean and delivered them from all its perils and miseries. But before leaving the ship, now this picture is very important, because before leaving the ship, the Pilgrims sat down together and drew up a set of laws. So see this paper that they're writing on? Okay, they're all going to have to agree on a set of rules or laws for their new colony. They wanted to be sure that both strangers and saints would follow the same rules. This was called, this is one of your questions, the Mayflower Compact. Okay, so the Mayflower Compact said that all colonists must agree together before a law could be passed, and that once laws were passed, each colonist would obey with all due submission and obedience. Almost every man on the Mayflower signed this compact, and then together, the saints and strangers elected a separatist, John Carver, to be their governor. So John Carver. I don't know which one he is in this picture. Which one do you think he is? If I had to guess, I would say maybe this guy. He looks like a governor, doesn't he? Looks like he might be in charge. I don't know. At first, the women and children stayed on the Mayflower while Bradford and others went out exploring. Finally, the explorers found the perfect place for the new colony. Cornfields were already planted there. Okay. A freshwater stream flowed nearby. They even found the remains of a few houses made of saplings bent into arches and thrust into the ground and then covered with thick mats made of reeds. It was a deserted Indian village, which was deserted several years before. That's one of your questions, so find the answer to that one. They returned to the Mayflower, shouting out the news of their great find. But the women who came running out to meet them were crying. They were weeping, so sad. While the men were out exploring, Dorothy Bradford had fallen overboard and drowned. Like, ooh, I'm gonna draw Dorothy. See this? She's saying, help me. I'll make her have long hair and maybe like a dress. There we go. Okay. She drowned. Anyway, she's dead. Okay, so William Bradford had little time for grief. Winter was coming, and the Pilgrims had to build log houses for their families. The work was hard and slow. The food they had brought with them from England, dried biscuits, beans, pork soaked in salt water, began to run out. They began to die from fever, scurvy, and starvation. Sometimes 2 or 3 died in one day, William Bradford wrote of these times. But then the Native Americans who lived nearby took pity on these newcomers. Massasoit, chief of the Wampanoag tribe, was willing to be friendly. One of his warriors, Squanto, could speak English. So, will the Native Americans really be friendly? Will the Pilgrims survive? Find out in tomorrow's episode of History. Dun, dun, dun! Okay, hope you enjoyed this. Bye, guys.